Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weekly overlook, and you might notice I am not on the SPC outlooks like I usually am for the weekly overlook, and if you watched today's daily forecast earlier, you would have heard that I am going to start posting the weekly overlook and daily forecast separate on Sundays now to free up time so you guys aren't having to look through the daily forecast and weekly overlook for either weather for today or weather for the rest of this week, so I'm going to post them separate so they'll be easier to find in the future. Taking a look at weather for this upcoming week, you can see that we do have a high pressure system that is expected to make its way out of Mexico, make its way north. It is expected to continue making its way north and intensify over the southwestern plains, and as this low pressure system is expected to move out further out east, it is expected to push the jet stream into almost a perfect horizontal line for much of this week across the north to north central plains region. And with very strong level flow across that region in particular, this jet stream is expected to allow for the possibility of some elongated photographs for much of this week, and as well for the possibility of maybe some very decent directional shear, which will allow for the possibility of maybe a few tornado threats today, likely going to be in the 2% to maybe some 5% ranges, because this is not associated with a deepening trough or a short wave. This is associated with the subtropical jet in a straight line, so overall directional shear is going to be pretty weak, and however, some strong speed shear will definitely be in place for the possibility of for some elongated photographs and the possibility of some very large hail that could develop for much of this week. Again, keep in mind the possibility of maybe a few tornado threats for today, but again, the main threat for this week is likely going to be the possibility of some very large hail. You can see that this very strong low pressure system is expected to move south out of Canada. It is expected to interact and trigger severe weather development for much of next week, and I'll be sure to cover that next week. However, for early Sunday, I think it could interact a little bit, allowing for maybe the possibility of some stronger directional shear, but mainly it's going to allow for the possibility of some elongated photographs as it hasn't fully entered the United States just yet. However, it is definitely going to allow for the possibility of some much stronger severe weather development next week, and again, I'll be sure to cover this next week. Taking a look at our dew points, keep in mind that high pressure system that is expected to stay pretty much almost completely stationary over the southwestern area of the United States. You can see that high pressure system, when it becomes stationary, it is expected to have very strong southerly flow and pull tons of moisture, not only from the east, but also from the south out of the Gulf of Mexico, and concentrate it to an area in the north central plains to the central plains, which will allow for the possibility of some pretty strong instability depending on our lapse rates in that particular region. And with the jet stream that is expected to move through that region and trigger tons of severe weather development for much of this week, we can definitely see the possibility of strong explosive storms with strong instability that is expected to possibly develop in that region in particular, with strong dew points, again depending on our lapse rates. With strong humidity like this, we definitely see the possibility of Cape values that do reach the 3000s, possibly the mid to upper 3000s, depending on our lapse rates. Taking a look at our lapse rates, you can see focusing on the north central plains region when that high pressure system is expected to move in and that low pressure system is beginning to move out of Canada and kind of push on the jet stream a little bit and kind of force it into a area in the north central plains. You can see very steep lapse rates are expected over much of the region. We are expected to have a very steep lapse rates, which will allow for the possibility of some extremely strong instability with the dew points that are expected to be in that region, with the dew points in the upper 60s and possibly the mid to low 70s. With very strong lapse rates like this, we are definitely expected to see the possibility of Cape values that do reach the 3000s, the mid 3000s, possibly the upper 3000s on some days, maybe the low 4000s in some isolated regions as well. Regarding our hail potential with these strong lapse rates, whenever we have those long photographs that are expected for much of this week, with strong lapse rates like this and the strong instability and strong lapse rates, that optimal hail development layer in the atmosphere is expected to move much closer down to the ground, and with strong instability. A very strong updraft is going to aloft those rain particles much easier and much farther up into the atmosphere, and way past that optimal hail development layer, which could either impact our hail developments by making it harder for large hail to develop, but it could also make it easier for large hail to develop with much lower temperatures the higher up you go in the atmosphere, and a very strong updraft making it easier to push those rain particles higher up could definitely allow for the possibility of some very, very large hail that could develop for much of this week in that particular region. Taking a look at our instability, keep in mind that high pressure system in the southwest. You can see that we are expected to have very, very strong instability in the north central plains, where the main focus for severe weather development is expected to be. It is mainly going to stay around the Nebraska area to the central plains, around the Kansas to Nebraska region. However, keep in mind, around today, if you watch today's forecast, we did expect Cape values that are expected to be in the mid 3000s to possibly the low 3000s in both regions for today's forecast. You can see right here we have what looks like moderate instability, and then back towards the Dixie Alley, slight risk for today. We do have a much higher moderate instability, but it is definitely still in the moderates. And looking at the GFS models, it does severely like downgrade everything and makes it a lot lot lower quality to look at. So with those Cape values in the 3000s that we were expecting, and how they're being displayed as moderate instability levels. If we go back to this week, you can see areas of very strong instability in the 3000s on the GFS models could be up to the 4000s. They could be up to very, very high levels, in particular across much of this region in the central to north central plains. Again, mostly being around Nebraska and Kansas. However, in South Dakota and North Dakota, we could definitely see the possibility of some moderate instability. Maybe not so much as high in the 3000s and 2000s as it is mostly in the triple digits and 1000s range. However, we could definitely see the possibility of much more moderate instability the higher up you go, but extremely strong instability could be possible across Nebraska and Kansas. Taking a look at our wind shear, keep in mind how the jet stream is expected to be more of a jet stream and not associated with any strong deepening trough. So directional shear is expected to be pretty much overall much weaker. It is expected to be again mostly in the 2% tornado threat to 5% tornado threat range, and not going to be all that strong. So a lot of this wind shear that you're seeing is expected to be mostly speed shear, and allow for the possibility of some strong elongated hodographs, allow for the possibility of some very large hail that could develop for much of this week. You see for much of this week, very, very strong speed shear is expected across the north central plains in the Nebraska region and South Dakota region, where we could see the possibility of some strong instability. So with strong speed shear in that region, we could definitely see the possibility of elongated hodographs and the possibility of some very large hail and possibly gorilla hail. And then with the instability that we saw, we could definitely see the possibility of maybe that 2% tornado threat or 5% tornado threat depending on our directional shear, and the possibility of some strong damaging outflow gusts. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And if you're in any of the areas I covered for severe weather development this week, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.